Do you hear everyone buzzing about Excel and wonder what it's all about? I mean, it's a nice application, but some people seem to think it's the end-all for everything, and you may not be sure exactly why they think that. Have you been using Excel but are left wondering if there's more? Do you enjoy the tools Excel provide but want to take your utilization of them to the next level? Well, if you're ready to get into the real guts of Excel and see how truly wonderful an application it can be, as well as how powerful it can be to help you analyze and solve your personal and business tasks, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Microsoft Excel 2010 Advanced. My name is Erin Olson, and I'm privileged to bring you this next level of Excel functionality to you from Total Training. I'm not sure the word advanced is exactly the right word for this series. Perhaps extended would be better. If you've learned with me before, you know that I break things down, try to get down to those core fundamentals, and the good news is those fundamental skills that you already know have not changed. But we can expand or extend those basic skills that you already know in order to let you integrate and fully utilize Excel, and that's really the goal of this entire series. As I prepared to write this series for you, I thought we'd approach it a little bit differently than the typical training course, shake it up a bit if you will. It's not going to take you through 1, 2, 3 to create things and then try to show you all of the options that you can apply to those. Instead, this is going to be a more real-world type of approach. For each chapter and lesson, we'll introduce a real-world issue that needs to be addressed. We'll then work through how to resolve the issue by manipulating, analyzing, or finding ways to display the data to give us the results that we want. In doing so, we won't be going over every possible option we have with every feature. Instead, we'll introduce the scenario, get familiar with what we have to work with, and then set about implementing our solutions. That means it's up to you to make connections when you encounter similar situations in real life so you can formulate your solutions at that time. This is really a higher level of learning, beyond just repeating steps that I show you, and it's going to actually make you more fluent and more capable when it comes to using Excel. We'll be addressing things like advanced functions, advanced charts, pivot tables, a variety of data analysis and auditing tools. We'll even work with macros and a little tiny bit of VBA. Doesn't that sound fun and great? I thought you'd think so, and I know that you're up to it. So if you're ready to get started, or should I say if you're ready to continue with your Excel education, let's get started with advanced functions. We have a sales tracking workbook open from the Chapter 1 Project Files folder. It was created by a coworker, and it's a solid but a basic workbook. It basically has two worksheets. If we look down at the bottom, we can see we have two tabs, one called Software Sales and the other called Products and Services. Products and Services is actually kind of like an inventory sheet. It has an item number, the category, vendor, application, version, the actual description of the product or service, as well as the sales price. Back on Software Sales, these are just that, sales transactions, with that basic information as well. Invoices, first and last names, the region, the sales rep, the sales date, delivery date, time to deliver, item number, and quantity. Our goal is to take this basic data and ensure the file is optimized for use by a variety of our personnel throughout the business processes, from the clerical staff all the way up to the executive team. We want to ensure that the file follows PCKey's commandments of Excel usage, in other words, best practices, to ensure that it's efficient and accurate, with minimal intervention, and that's also a critical part. We don't want to have to type things or do things manually all the time. We just want it to be kind of automated and ready for our staff to interact with it by adding new records, analyzing the data, and so forth. So the first thing that we want to tackle is to ensure that the clerical staff and the sales staff can enter sales data quickly and efficiently. What we have on this particular worksheet, if we look all the way over onto the right-hand side, is a single column called item number. Now, item number makes sense to a lot of people because some people work with those numbers. But unfortunately, M1, M2, and M3 right now, especially to us, doesn't make much sense. So we want to be able to enter an item number and then have Excel automatically show us the description as well as the price for that item. That way, by only entering one piece of information, we're actually going to get 3 in return. That's going to make things a lot faster and easier for people to use. What we need to do to kind of get started with this is we need to make room for our other two fields. We probably want to put these between item number and quantity. So I'm going to select columns J and K. Going to right click, choose Insert, and that'll give us the room that we want. Now, of course, because we want everything to be labeled, I'm going to type in description and price. Now we're ready to actually get started with our calculation. What we know is that we have one piece of information. We know what the item number is, but we want to return something else. And that means we need to look up information. In order to do that, we'll use a lookup function. And the most popular one that almost everybody needs to know about is called VLOOKUP. It stands for vertical lookup. And I want to kind of show you what's going to happen here before we actually create it. We're going to say that we know what the item number is. We want Excel to take that number, to move over to our products and services worksheet, to find a match for that number, and once it finds that match, then we want it to return one of these other pieces of information. Now, the reason I wanted to take you through this is because we have to know what column of information we want, and those columns are numbered starting on the left. So item number is column 1, category is 2, vendor is 3, application is 4, so on and so forth. So to get all the way over here to products and services, that's our description, it would be column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And price, of course, would be column 7. Now, with that little piece of information in mind, we can go ahead and get started. And of course, in order to do that, we need to go back to our original worksheet, our sales worksheet. As with any calculation, we need to click in the cell we want to start to work with, and I'm going to start to type equals VLOOKUP. Of course, we don't have to type the whole thing because we have autocomplete, so I'll just press Tab. And now we can see how we're going to put together this VLOOKUP function. It's a little bit more advanced than kind of the big 5 that you may be used to seeing. First thing I'm going to do is actually move this down so we can see the whole thing. There we go. And we can see that this particular function has 4 arguments, 3 of which are required. Lookup value, table array, column index number, and range lookup. What these mean are, first of all, the lookup value is what do we know? The second, the table array, is where do we want Excel to go to find a match for what we know? The third argument is, once it finds the match, which piece of information do we want to return? You'll notice that range lookup is supposed to be optional. I kind of argue with this. What this means is if you leave it out, or if you put in true, if Excel finds something that's close enough, it will go ahead and return that value. Well, what I know is when we're looking at these product numbers, if it doesn't find exactly the product number I'm looking for, then I don't want it to return anything. Otherwise, we could get wrong descriptions and wrong prices. So for range lookup, we aren't going to leave that off. I recommend that you usually do not. I realize that sometimes there are some circumstances where you may say close enough is good enough, but for most of us, we want to find a match. So let's go ahead and get started. VLOOKUP. First argument, what is the value that we know? Well, we know our item number, and our item number happens to be in cell I2. We can go ahead and type that in. The next question is, what is our table? In other words, where is the information located that we're going to be able to find this match? And that's all the way back on our product services sheet. Fortunately, that has already been named, so all we have to do is start typing. Once we start typing, we can not only see the product function, but we also can see the name that's been defined in this workbook. Don't forget, all of these tools are going to help us even if we're not completely familiar with how a workbook is structured. We'll go ahead and press Tab to select that, and a comma because we're done with that argument. And now we need to know the column index number. In other words, when it goes through the left-hand side of our inventory table, it wants to know what other piece of information we want to return. Now, I may not remember exactly, but I think it was number 6. Let's go ahead and type column 6. The important thing to remember here is that unlike the way we're normally trained, which is columns have letters, the argument for this particular function is a number, not a letter. We'll type in the number 6. And here comes the part I was telling you that technically is optional, but I don't think you should leave it as optional. I'm going to do comma and type false. False means that if Excel does not find the exact item number we're looking for, it's going to return an error, not a close enough answer. All right, there's our VLOOKUP. Let's press Enter and see what we get. Now it's a little difficult to see because our column isn't sized appropriately, so let's just go ahead and take a second to resize it. And there we go. We can see that M1 actually refers to the home and student software. We, of course, could go ahead and click on that, double-click the fill handle, and now we can see the type of software or the description for each and every one of these items. Now we need to basically repeat the process to find our price. The good thing about a VLOOKUP is it really isn't going to change except for one of the arguments. In this case, the function is going to be exactly the same, except instead of returning the 6th column of information, we're going to return the 7th. So we'll just go ahead and do this quickly. Start to type VLOOKUP and press Tab. What we know is in I2. Where we want to go to find a match is our product services area. This time we want to return column 7, but we still want to require an exact match. There we go, and we can see that the home and student version of the software is $149. Let's go ahead and fill that down. And one last thing, let's go ahead and format it so it actually looks like money. We'll select the column and just do a quick click. And there we go. We were able to use a named region, which is perfectly good, and I actually love using names. But remember, you also could use regular syntax or the regular way of referring to cells and areas. If you're not familiar with that, here's kind of a quick overview. You need to always refer to the broadest object first, narrowing it down to the most specific object. I think the easiest way would be to just click on things. So if I didn't have this named, I would have just gone to the second worksheet and dragged over the area I wanted and let Excel go ahead and do all the work. But just so you're aware, if you were going to a different file, the file name would come first enclosed in square brackets. The second part would be the worksheet name, followed by an exclamation mark. And then lastly would be the cell or the range of cells. If a workbook or worksheet contains spaces, like some of ours might, it has to be enclosed in a single quotation mark. In this case, we weren't referring to a cell or a range of cells, but instead to the name of a table. So as I said, it's easiest to click on things or to use names. I prefer to use names because it also makes things easier to understand. When we look at these functions in the formula bar, we can see that it's going to something called products and services, and that's more descriptive than something like sheet 2 A1 to B55. We've been able to use VLOOKUP, V standing for vertical, to find information. We very simply are now able to go in and enter a single item number. Excel will then do the work by going to our second worksheet and returning 2 different pieces of information on our behalf, both of which match the item number. It's called a VLOOKUP because it looks vertically up and down the first column of our data region to find what it's looking for. Just so you know, there's also an HLOOKUP that stands for horizontal, which means Excel will look across a row to find a value. They basically work exactly the same way, just in different directions. All of Excel's lookup functions perform some type of lookup in this regard, returning some type of value based on something that we know. We've made a little bit of progress with our sales worksheet. Our sales staff can now easily see the description and the price of an item by simply entering the item number. So they're able to actually get 3 pieces of information by only entering 1. And that certainly is making them more efficient.